Lurking in the midst of my discussion of Emet-Selch and Medion was another villainous figure. Some might argue that this figure is the true baddie of their tales. I don't necessarily agree with that, but in many ways this figure is the architect of the woes that drove them to baddiehood. That figure is Fandaniel, one of the Ascians, beings who are the story's central antagonists. I had to leave things at Fandaniel as much more Amon than Hermes, but this only scratches the surface. He deserves a deeper dive, and here it is. Let's trace the path that led this soul,
wherever your souls may drift in the underworld, may you find tranquil seas,
to doom the world 3 times. In the Eden storyline, we meet a young woman named Gaia. She has no memories of who she is or where she came from beyond a strange voice she feels reaching out to her. Tracing her past only leads to dead ends, but she reluctantly forms bonds, especially with Reen, who is also dealing with issues of identity. It's soon revealed that Gaia is an Ascian, a member of the Convocation no less, one of the reincarnated holder of the seat of Lawgriff. Her fellow reincarnated and also lover Mitron seeks to restore her ancient memories so she will be his Lawgriff once more. Previously I alluded to Ascian names being a whole thing, but they will become intensely important here. The names of each Convocation member are both a name and a title. The Convocation has 14 seats for 14 roles, and upon assuming that role, it becomes their name. They don't become, say, an Emet-Selch or even the Emet-Selch, they are Emet-Selch. Hythlodaeus is Emet-Selch's closest friend and knew him well before he became Emet-Selch, possibly centuries before, but he only ever calls him Emet-Selch because that's his name now. It exhibits how serious the ancients were about service and duty. They are service and duty. It's easy to see how thinking of their own people any differently might seem alien. So Mitron is shocked when restoring the memories of Lawgriff doesn't work, but it doesn't. She still likes being Gaia, and she should. Gaia gets the most awesome anime-ass moment in the game.
The light! It's too much for her to bear! Ugh, she won't last much longer! Enough of this! Power of darkness, answer my call!
Gaia doesn't want to be Lawgriff and rejoin the Convocation's great work. She decides that even though she has Lawgriff's memories, she wants to live this new life as Gaia, helping the people Lawgriff and Mitron harmed, with her new beloved at her side. As she says following her big anime-ass moment,
I want to see what tomorrow will bring!
Tomorrow isn't really a thing for the Ascians. They're only concerned with returning to yesterday, but Gaia isn't anymore. She rejects the identity and scheme that her fellows seem to believe could not be rejected. Even they have free choice. But not all the reincarnated use this free choice to the same effect. No longer under the watchful eyes of the Unsundered, Fandaniel emerges as the latest and possibly last member of the Convocation to menace the Warrior of Light and threaten the Source. But he's not intending to avenge his fallen fellows, as seems to be par for the course. He doesn't like them very much, and he's not there to resume their great work. There is no mournful yearning for the memories of a departed paradise beating in the heart of his schemes. There is, in truth, nothing beating there at all.
Because I want wretched creatures who ask such meaningless questions to die! You! And you! And you! I want you all to die! And I want to die too! Oh, yes! I want to die and take everyone with me in a paroxysm of pain and suffering!
But before that, thousands and thousands of years before, like all the other reincarnated, he was someone much, much different. He was Hermes, and he never intended to harm anyone. The ancients were so powerful and gifted in magic they could create life. But they understood how dangerous this power could be and shaped their society and themselves accordingly.
Ours is the wisdom to weave the fabric of reality. Ours is the power to create.
The power to create, but the wisdom to weave reality. An important distinction the ancients understood very well. Creations were not just set loose upon their world, they were submitted, reviewed, examined, archived, and ultimately tested to ensure they wouldn't disrupt the careful balance the ancients sought to maintain. This testing was overseen at Elpis, for a time under the care of Hermes. Hermes was thoughtful, philosophical, and gentle. Perhaps a bit too gentle. Elpis was a testing facility, and inevitably some concepts didn't pass the test. It falls to Hermes to make this final assessment, and should the need arise, send those who don't pass along their way. For most of the ancients, this was all part of the process. Their concepts were always on file, maybe some revisions were called for, regardless, no big deal. But to Hermes, it is a big deal. He didn't see the creatures in his care as concepts, but as individuals, so his task pained him, filled him with doubts, and left him unfulfilled. What even was purpose? Living in a society that held tasks were purpose, he found few answers. So he looked elsewhere. No one on his world could answer his questions. None of them even seemed inclined to ask them in the first place. So he created the means to inquire of the people who surely live in the stars. What meaning do they find in existence? What do they live for? We've talked about how well that went.
Such is the answer we have found in the stars. Such is the gift we now offer to Atheris.
Hermes seems rightly horrified by what Medion has revealed, and he certainly didn't expect it, but he understood there was every possibility the answer they brought back wouldn't be easy.
Yet whatever answers we receive, I will not dismiss them out of hand. No, I will think earnestly on them all, and I will share them with our people, that together we may contemplate our own existence. Perhaps then our star will become a better place, not only for man, but for all life.
But he needs to get answers before he can contemplate them, and he is extremely dedicated to getting them. Dedicated enough to turn to violent defiance that will certainly cost him his new position in the Convocation and probably his current one as well. Well, he says this is all to answer the questions he seeks, but that's only part of what's driving him. It's also pretty apparent he didn't want to do to his creation what the chief overseer of Elpis was tasked to do to so many others. Regardless, he gets his answers, and makes a fateful choice. In Armageddon, a sundering, and unknown thousands of years later, the Source was ruled by a great empire. The Allagan Empire, driven by the ambitions of its first emperor Zonde, held dominion over nearly the entire world. They had mastered bioengineering, commanded armies of clones and machines, stood at the height of technology. And as the centuries since the passing of Zonde unspooled, more and more of the Allagans beheld the grandeur around them and looked down from their pinnacles at the peoples they had brought to heal, and were content. There was only one who wasn't. Amon, the most gifted of all of Alag's technologists and magicians. He looked around at his contented fellows, venal, vapid, sated with disgust and revulsion. To what end did he push his innovations if they would only be used in the cruel pranks of empty, petty rivalries? Surely his work should be for the glory of mighty Alag, not for the braying laughter of fatted nobles tormenting each other. In Amon's diagnosis, the cure for the disease of complacency in the Allagan Empire was a great leader, one with ambition, vision, and drive. But none, not even he, was worthy. Only one person in history had been, and to restore Alag to what it had been, he would need to be reborn. At long last, and with several heavy prices, Hermes had the answers he sought. He had vowed that he would contemplate their import no matter what they were, though he did not expect anything quite this disastrous. Yet, there they were. And if there was no salvation to be found in the stars, if indeed his task was the only purpose he could find, why not take it to its logical end?
Let us settle this with a determination. In my authority as Chief Overseer of Elpis, I will make a judgment on man's fitness to exist. If he can learn to value all life and retain his will to live, even should his end be justified, he will surely find a way to avert his demise.
So he let his creation escape and hide her existence with the help of a memory-altering device. But he doesn't necessarily think she is correct.
Hermes, won't you come with me? If you were to shed your flesh, I should be able to carry you.
I will remain. As a man, I will oppose the oblivion you bring.
We've been over what comes next, the final days, the desperation, the sacrifice, Zodiark. With no memory of what had truly transpired with Medion, he joined the Convocation, takes the seat of Fandaniel, and when the crisis arrived, worked alongside the remaining members to manifest Zodiark and restore the world to its former glory, which... well, what would you call that?
Oh, the irony.
Unaware of his role in bringing about the final days, he spends the last of his working to keep the society he desperately thought needed to change from changing. It may well be that the final days were so horrible, Fandaniel felt there could be no answers to his questions, and they could only go back to the perfect paradise whose imperfections only he felt. Others had to find an answer instead.
I choose to believe in mankind's potential, in his ability to find a way forward. So let there be no way back. From that temptation, I sunder us. No more shall man have wings to bear him to paradise. Henceforth, he shall walk.
Having reached what they thought had been the very height of civilizations, mighty Alag had found a way to climb even higher. Through his command of magic and cloning, Amon had restored the first Emperor Zondi to the throne. In his first life, Zondi had never quite achieved his great ambition. He had died with parts of the world unconquered. The land of Mericidia, protected by gods and dragons, had resisted conquest until he passed. In this second life, it would not be so fortunate. Driven by Zandi's ambitions and Amon's genius, Alag had reached its Emperor's dream. The gods called by the people of Mericidia had not just fallen, they were not just sealed, they powered Alag's greatest laboratory. They hadn't just defeated the Dreadworm Bahamut, they had bound him in a second moon, Dalamud, and he powered the rest of their civilization. Peasant leaders were transformed and bound to defend them. Amon's rivals were sentenced to horrifying prisons of flesh that were once their own bodies. Led by Zonde's inexhaustible ambition, mighty Alag prepared to take the Empire to the stars. But it was not a relentless hunger that left the clone Emperor unsatisfied.
Heed me, Amon, no matter how vast one's empire, or full one's treasure vault. All is rendered meaningless by death. In the end, all is lost.
A shocking thing to hear from one's ruler, one's creation, or one's savior, and Amon was being told this by all three at once. Haunted by the nothingness he feared waiting for him, Zondi prepared for his next grand ambition. If he was destined to become nothing again, then all the world's people should share in that nothing. He would use the Crystal Tower to draw in the power of Dalamud and open a portal to his allies in the Void, bringing their leader, the Cloud of Darkness, through to consume the world as they'd done to Mericidia. But as Zondi's intentions became clear to his subjects, the dreadful fate of previous rebels was no longer enough to keep them in line, and uprisings spread across the Empire. Desperate to see his final will done, Zonde rushed to draw upon the power of Dalamud, and Amon was ready to follow his emperor until the end. Until a personal history he never really knew intervened.
You know as well as I that the Emperor stands to lose this war, and so I have come to claim you. For while your methods leave something to be desired, we cannot deny the results of your work. And as fortune would have it, the seat of Fandaniel, your rightful seat, lies vacant and waiting. Take your place amongst your peers, rather than die a pointless death amidst the ashes of your doomed nation. Send one of your clones to the Crystal Tower that you might see for yourself. See what lies ahead.
And he did. Now Fandaniel again, he left a clone of Amon in the Crystal Tower and watched with his new peers as the power from the Red Moon was too much to contain, the world itself buckled, the Crystal Tower sank beneath the earth, and all of Alag was destroyed. Just as intended.
Alas, it is not your grand scheme that will succeed, but ours.
From its inception to its cataclysmic demise, despite any agency or dominion it may have claimed, the Allagan Empire was always in service to higher powers, always a tool in the Ascian design. I worry the nature of these projects require me to focus on Emet-Selch's flaws and blind spots such that he may seem like a fool, but that isn't so. Fools don't orchestrate the ascension of multiple civilizations, and they don't architect the demise of 8 worlds over the course of millennia accidentally. Zonde's hand shaped Alag, but Emet-Selch's prods set him in motion. With a few suggestions, he kickstarted an empire that would turn gods into batteries, but it would also confirm everything he thought about the Sundered Worlds. The world unsundered was one of harmony, beauty, and enlightenment. The Allagan Empire was one of oppression, cruelty, and conquest. Just look at where each conducted their research. The ancients had Elpis, a cluster of pristine islands among the clouds where they could nurture new life. And Alag had Azisla, the floating continent where madmen twisted flesh to serve their twisted emperor. They barely had power, and certainly lacked wisdom. Given the chance, surely all of Emet-Selch's old peers would embrace what they were. If you could be a man who nurtures flying fish, or a man who grafts the heads of hounds onto a rival because she is frightened by dogs, wouldn't you surely pick the former? Throughout his life, Amon had strange dreams of some foreign but familiar world where he was a man named Hermes, and he felt this man's yearning. But now that he was Fandaniel again, he looked to Zonde and concluded, yearning was a fool's game. Between lives, the dreamer became the oppressor, and in the end, a smug nihilist emerged from them both. It's tough to reconnect with what Hermes became after seeing what he had been. But Hermes and Amon are not as separate as they seem. There are significant but surfacey things, like both are brilliant and creative, and both held positions of power and esteem in their societies. But notably, neither led them. Even as the last of the Ascians, Fandaniel chooses to serve. He is manipulating his sworn lord for his own ends, but he still takes on that role. Both perceived terrible faults in the world around them, which drove them to desperate actions in search of solutions, in search of meaning. But both looked outward, elsewhere, whether to the distant stars or the distant past. And though he's speaking of others, Xenos is well aware of how dangerous that can be.
What meaning there is to be found in the petty vicissitudes of your existence must be gleaned by you, and you alone.
Neither Amon nor Hermes were capable of doing that. For all their power, inventiveness, and even vision, they wanted meaning and significance to come from something outside themselves, and that blinded them in a way. They assumed what they sought must come from something grandiose and sweeping. But as Medion observes, her creator didn't need to send 1,000 of her sisters across the cosmos. Instead of expecting significance and meaning to come from someone else, they may have found it in someone else. And then suddenly, meaning and significance are everywhere. Coffee biscuits. A festival. the things tomorrow can bring.